Hello friends, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a place where for me, every day feels like Christmas as we unwrap the gift of being able to explore the entire planet right from the comfort of our sim pits. This is going to be a special Yuletide flight as we journey across the frosty landscape of Iceland. And there's a few reasons why I wanted to come up here for this one. One, it's Christmas and flying anywhere warm would be completely out of the question. Two, I wanted to check out the spots where they had those recent eruptions, which I think may have finally just stopped yesterday or the day before, but we'll check that out, see what it looks like. And finally, I just picked up the Northern Lights add-on from the marketplace, so we're going to see how that looks as we get closer to our destination. I'll set the sun, and we'll see if we can spot those. This total flight will be right around 100 miles, putting our airtime at around 40 minutes in the old Kodiak. And as you can see, I also wrapped it in our Christmas pajamas because we celebrate the season in style around here. So after departing from Keflavik International Airport, Bravo India Kilo Foxtrot, we're going to circle around the city in the peninsula on which it sits as we head down the coast to check out the volcanic region. Then we'll turn towards the northeast to our destination of Reykjavik Airport, which also happens to be the capital, so we'll check all that out once we get up there after we set the sun. And yes, it's going to be a little bit dim out here. This is as bright as it gets this time of year. The sun is as high as I could get it in the sky, but we just had the winter solstice, so this is it for these guys. So my recommendation would be to try to watch this video if you can in a dim spot. Maybe pour yourself a nice mug of cocoa or some hot cider and just curl up by the fire as we all wait for Santa Claus to come to town. And as you can see, Chet's with us. He's just as tired of these warm Florida winters as I am. So he came along for the ride. Let's go ahead and get her all started up here. We'll be on our way. It was 72 degrees out here yesterday. I was walking around in shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops. For those of you who don't know, I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. And it is toasty. All right, give it some gas. Man, and from January to, I don't know, March or April, when everyone else is still freezing in the rest of the country, I do like the warm weather in Florida, but not the day before Christmas. I could do without that. All right, let's see. Get everything set up here while we're waiting for the engine to do its thing. That's good. What's our advisory? Nothing? Okay, that's good. Turn that off, that off. Get this back down to standby. All right, everything's sounding good. The live weather, it was overcast, which felt very realistic for Iceland, but the wind was blowing here on the ground at 26 knots, and I didn't feel like fighting that the whole time, so... And there was no snow on the ground, and I felt like since it's Christmas time, we had to get a little snow going. All right, I got the taxi lights on, and we got our fuel on. Everything's good to go. I'm feeling good. You feeling good, Chet? Yeah, nice and cold. You got your little windbreaker on there. That's great. All right, so let's see. Parking brake off. And we had to wind around just a little bit to get over to the runway, which is not a big deal. Say goodbye to our little pushback guy that we didn't use. And here we go. You can hear that even though there's no snow on the taxiway, the tires are crunching a little bit. I did turn the temperature down into the 20s, so maybe the tires are just a little cold. They'll crunch for us. Look at that sunset. It's always sunset this time of year. That looks amazing. I've got 5 add-ons installed for this flight, and only one of them is payware. It's the Northern Lights pack, which was like $6, I think. And we are right at the southern threshold of where we would be able to see those. I saw a map, and Iceland is about as far south as you can go. Greenland, of course, Canada, northern Canada, Siberia if you're flying around up there. Boy, that crunching is really loud. But it makes me feel even colder, so I like it. All of the add-ons, of course, will be included in the video description, and I highly encourage you to put every one of them in because one of them puts a lot of nice landmarks in here. And one of them is also an ORBX Iceland mesh pack, which is free on their website. I don't know if it's always free or just free right now, so if you want to get it, go ahead and check that out. And it's not huge. A lot of those mesh packs, like that South America one, were like 25 gigabytes. This one was around 800 megabytes, so not too bad. All right, once we get stopped here, I'm going to go ahead and set our cruise altitude, which is going to be 2,500 for most of the flight, even though we will be flying over some volcanoes. As you're going to see in this part of Iceland, they're not real huge. But for a little portion of it, we may need to go up a little higher just because I don't want to be grazing the tops of them. All right, 2,500 feet. And taxi lights off, landing lights on, 1 notch of flaps. Everything else is looking good. Full condition. You ready? Yep. Let's do it. And in addition to the add-ons that I've got included in the video description, this exact flight plan, if you like it, will also be in there, where you can click on that link and then pull it right over into little NavMap, and then pull it from there into the sim. And if you don't know how to do that, I do have a couple tutorial videos down there in our video archive somewhere. You can check those out too. Alright, once we get to the end of the runway, we'll throw on the autopilot. I'll start telling you about this place. Man, I'm kind of liking the permanent sunset. Very cool. Very cool and very cold. Alright, flaps up. And we'll go ahead and turn our landing lights off. And this plane lets you know everything you're doing wrong. On one of my test flights, I forgot to get the landing lights on in time, so it let me know about that. Put the flaps out too early, let me know about that. Alright, autopilot on, nav, vertical speed, of course, we'll do 500 feet a minute. Alright, we're off. So as we turn back around to the north to get a look at the town of Keflavik, we're going to see a set of abandoned runways once we make this left-hand turn back over our left-hand shoulder. And that's called Patterson Field. It was built in 1942 by the U.S. Navy as a refueling stop for transatlantic flights that were heading over here for the war. But they shut that down as soon as the war ended. And unlike some of the other fields out here from the war, they left the tarmac down there. And on the satellite map at the end, all along one of the runways, they've got a bunch of, I guess probably ammunition bunkers that they also left, which we can't see in the sim, but any pictures from the ground you can see them, and I'll show you on the satellite map as well. But there was a Google review left for this place by one of the locals who said there's a lot of nostalgia surrounding it because the kids out here, when they're learning to drive before they take their driver's exam, would come and practice on the runway. And he said of particular interest was being able to do it when they were frozen, which was good experience for driving on the iced over roads out here, which I bet you gotta be good at. Alright, so there it is right there, and all of the little bunkers are right along the sides of this runway right here. And back this way about, I don't know, maybe a mile in this direction, if we could see over there, which we can't, there is the site where Camp Hopkins was, which is where all the U.S. barracks were. And there's only a couple of foundations left there now, and you can see where the roads used to be from the satellite map, but all they have standing really is two little memorial markers that tell about it. And we're going to see lots of these types of things out here. Almost every one of these are thermal springs, so you could probably hop right in there just about any time of year. Feel pretty good, if not a little too hot. So here comes the town of Keflavik, and that was founded in the 1500s by Scottish fishermen who started building this whole region up as a fishing and fish processing center. And we'll see lots of little fishing towns along the coastline. And this area we're in right now is really where the bulk of Iceland's population lives. I'm sure most of you have flown over here before because it's all so beautiful. But most of it's pretty vacant. And not much else happened out here until the U.S. built these two big airports in the 40s, which is when the population really started to grow. But it is by no means big. They got about 20,000 people living down here right now. And I would bet that most of them that aren't fishermen work in the air services and hospitality business, because this airport right here, the one that we left from, is the main international hub for Iceland. And it's the largest airport in the country. So you got their plane mechanics, air traffic control, Uber drivers. And it's a good thing this place is here because a lot of the big tourist attractions in Iceland are also in this area, and we'll see them on this flight. Ooh, look at that. They got a couple little fishing vessels down there. That's cool. I don't have any of the ships turned on, so I think those are probably from the add-on pack because I don't remember seeing those before I put those in there. And Iceland, of course, did get an update of its own in one of the recent world updates, and everything looks really, really nice out here, unlike Malta, which I just can't help myself from mentioning because I was so utterly disappointed by that. But they really did a nice job out here. Everything looks believable and realistic. Got a couple soccer fields out there. Very nice. And for some reason, they've got a lot of golf courses out here. I never would have thought that Iceland would have been a hot spot for golfing, but they've got several. We're going to see one in just a second called Holmsvalar. I just found that a bit surprising, but I bet, and they're all right along the water too. I bet once the sun gets up there and it gets a little warmer, it's probably pretty nice. But if it's anything near as windy as it really is in real life today, that would probably not be a good round of golf. And there's no such thing as a good round of golf for me, which is why I don't play it anymore, even living down here in Florida. Alright, you see this little thing right here? I think that might be a radar dome, because what's there in real life now is just the ruins of a place called Rockville Air Station. And that was also a U.S. military site, but not for World War II. They built that in the 1950s once the Cold War started to keep tabs on Soviet long-range heavy bombers crossing over the North Atlantic. So I guess once they would spot them coming in on that thing, they would launch some interceptors from the air station back there and just shadow them as they prowled the U.S. coastline. And that place was open all the way until 1997. And I think they're still tracking the bombers, but they're doing it from back there at Keflavik now. And there's one of the golf courses. Look at that. Right along the water. Very nice. Looks awfully green for this time of year, despite being covered with a little blanket of snow. Alright, this little town up on this point here is spelled with a letter that I've never seen before, and I believe it's pronounced Gardouche. Once again, I tried to find the correct pronunciations for everything, but even for this one, you can rate the pronunciations on a lot of those little sites, which are probably AI generated, I think. And this one got a 1 out of 5 stars, so I may be even saying that completely wrong. But the main thing this place is known for is its history, primarily fishing and lighthouses, one of which we'll see here in just a moment. And there are actually 2 lighthouses still standing out here today, and I couldn't tell which one was the older lighthouse because they're both called the Old Lighthouse in Google. So the first one is out here, which didn't render at all. It's on the very tip of that little jetty, and the other one is going to pop into view here in just a second, and it's right down here. And I think this is the older one. And if that is it, it was built in 1897. There it is right there, see it? Which would make it one of the oldest lighthouses in the country, and in just a little bit we'll see the spot where the oldest really is. And this long building right here is called the Lighthouse Inn, naturally. And I think they got a little restaurant or something down here at the base of this one. And I'm not sure what that is, but that's the only strange artifact we'll see on the coastlines out here because the rest of them look pretty good. Maybe that's a little oil slick. Look at that. This is going to look so good once we come around in that low sun. Beautiful. Look at that. So nice. So nice and so Christmassy. Yeah, it's supposed to be 70 degrees again today, getting up to about 75 before we have a real cold snap, and it gets down in the 50s here in about a week, which is just gut-wrenching for this time of year. Only time I miss being up north. Alright, this next little area here is another fishing village, and that one's called Saint Corse Fair. And again, totally taking a stab in the dark with that. And they kind of roll their R's a little bit and their TH sounds up here. I tried practicing that and just couldn't get it right, so I'm just going to Englishize that word. That looks nice too. Let's see if we can spot our radar dome again. We'll get another better look at it once we come around. I don't think the radar dome's even there anymore either, so the add-on must have put that back in, because from the Google images, I couldn't see anything that looked like a radar dome out here. Alright, we're going to get a much better look at the Keflavik airport as we make another pass along the western side of it just ahead, so I'll give you some more details about the history of that place as we do it. As I already mentioned, it was built at the start of World War II, along with the other place that they shut down, so that U.S. aviators could stop along the way, over to their destinations in England for the most part, I would imagine. But unlike the one they closed down, they kept this place open after the war, and they took it back over as a completely civilian airport for just a few years until the U.S. returned again to track the Russian bombers in 1951. But while the Yanks were away, Iceland started operating the fields for civilian use and continued to do so even after the military moved back in. And once that happened, all the civilians wanting to fly in and out had to clear all kinds of military checkpoints until they moved the general traffic terminal, and that didn't happen until 1987. And as you can imagine, the locals weren't too keen on foreign militaries camping out on their turf, so they started protesting that to no avail in the 1960s and 70s, while everyone in the U.S. was also protesting everything to no avail. And when the U.S. was finally dang good and ready to leave, they did, but that didn't happen until 2006, so they were out here for quite a while. And I read that this airport is specifically used only for international flights. All the domestic stuff goes in and out of the smaller place up in Reykjavik, which is where we're going to be landing, which is right up in this vicinity up here. But this is the big one. Both of these runways are 10,000 feet, and they have ILS approaches on all four ends of them. So if you want to fly in here and you want to fly at ILS, I'll have no problem, and they're so big that you could land probably just about anything you want up here. What do you think, Chet? Looks pretty good, huh? And I don't know if Iceland... So I'm pretty sure that all the foreign militaries have moved out now, but one of the add-ons put a couple of military aircraft, some big ones right down here on this pad. See them down there? And I can't tell what they are from here. And they also touched up all of these hangars down here, and there's even some little fighters down inside of them. So if you want to cruise over there and check that out... Well, look at that. We're getting some stepping shadows down there. I didn't notice that before. I moved the time of day to around 2 o'clock. On my last one, it was a little earlier, so maybe if the sun was in a slightly different spot, we wouldn't be seeing that. So you may want to try shifting it around a little bit. And it really doesn't matter. As long as the sun's up, it's going to look about like this. So if you're not right at 2 o'clock, it'll still probably look pretty similar to this because the sun is just so low on the horizon. But that looks cool. And there's the one they shut down. And you know what? From here, you can kind of see where all those bunkers are, because this would be them right there. So maybe we're just at a bad angle before. So before we get to the volcanoes, and we're almost there, I did learn something new about the geology of Iceland when I was researching this flight. I thought that this place had formed the same way that Hawaii did, and if you want to learn all about that, be sure to check out our last flight. Well, it turns out I was only partially correct in that assumption. This place sits right on top. It straddles the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is where the Eurasian and the North American tectonic plates are parting ways. So they're diverging here, not converging. And in this particular spot, there is another hot spot like the one that did form Hawaii, where lava is just erupting up from that seam. And this one is called the Iceland Plume. Gosh, that's beautiful. Look at that. So we could say that Iceland is in the process of tearing itself right in half, but it won't actually split in half as long as the lava keeps coming up that ridge to fill in the gaps, which it has been doing, and which is why that eruption was happening recently. And right up here, as we kind of come into this little bay here, there's going to be a tiny little lake that we'll see, and in just a second we'll see a road running along this side of it. That's it right there if you saw it. And right over here, there's a footbridge called the Bridge Between the Continents, where supposedly you can go and walk across that. It's going to be too small to see in the sim, but you can take a picture of yourself straddling two different continents. So when it comes to which playlist I should put this on, I wasn't really sure. It's going to have to go on Europe, I guess, because technically this is considered part of Europe, but geologically half of it is in North America. Whew, that is amazing. Look at that. Beautiful. I love flying around up here. But as you can imagine, volcanoes are just a part of life up here, and so are earthquakes. In fact, the current eruption is happening right along another ridgeline right up here, and I'll show you right where that is as we fly past it. So I think you can see the parking lot for that little bridge. Let me see if I can see it. There's a tiny little opening. That's it right there, I think. And then the bridge crosses this thing somewhere up here, but it's really, really small. You can see it on the satellite map, but not in here. But one of the things that's not so bad about volcano life is the ability to generate an abundance of geothermal power, and they do a lot of that up here. Very green country as far as electricity production goes, and we're about to see one of those places right up here. And if you're not familiar with how that process works, there's the power plant right there. In the case of this one, they've got 12 drilling stations out here that all go about 9,000 feet down, and they get water that's 600 degrees Fahrenheit up from there, run it through a bunch of pipelines over this place, and that's what heats the water for the steam turbines. And if 600 degrees sounds pretty hot, it is as far as producing geothermal power goes. This is the hottest water used anywhere in the world for that type of electricity. So that's interesting. And I bet you could just rip your clothes off and jump right in there. No, chat, we're not going to land. Not yet. Although you'd like to, wouldn't you? All right, we got a little lighthouse twofer down here, and that is not true to life. They really don't have two stuck right next to each other like that. One of them was added in the sim, and the other is a duplicate that came from one of the add-ons. And of course, I didn't want to pull the add-on out because it added so much other cool stuff. And they actually look a little bit different too, don't they? But that is where the oldest foundation in the country was built, and all that's left of it was the base, because 8 years after they built it, in 1878, they had an earthquake that destroyed it, so they built another one on top of it, and one of the ones that we see today was built in 1929. And this thing right here is also an add-on. And I don't know if you saw when we were coming in, there's another big rock sticking out in the water. That's called the Vala Nukur Rock Formation. Also a big tourist spot to come and take pictures and look at the power plant and the lighthouse. And one of the reviewers said you can drive right up to this power plant, no checkpoints to get in or anything, park in the parking lot, and then just walk right into the place with nobody harassing you, which is crazy. You could never get away with that in the U.S. You got too many wackos out here. And maybe they got a lot of wackos in Iceland too, and they just don't care. But that is not something we could do around here, that's for sure. So yeah, all the wells are out here. And if there wasn't snow on the ground, you could actually see the little squares where each of the wells are. So cool. Look at that scene. Look at all those mountains up there. Just amazing. So beautiful. Alright, we're going to hug the coast for just a few miles here as we make our way over to the town of Grindavik, which is just south of where those most recent eruptions were. But before we get to the town, we're going to see two enormous 1,000-foot radio masts that are operated by the U.S. Navy, still operated by them, and this is them right here. We'll get a much better look at those guys. There's one there, and there's another one sticking up over here. And the only man-made structures taller than these things in Iceland is another transmission tower way out west from here that tops out at over 1,300 feet. And that one is currently the tallest long-wave radio mast in the world. But that one's operated by Iceland, not the U.S. military. Look at these things. Oh, and they got another little tiny one right on top of that mountain. Can you see it? Not as big as these guys. But these things are so powerful. They have two structures at the bottom called the helix house, where they keep the coils for those things. And there's so much juice running through there that initially the coils kept exploding, arcing and exploding. So it took them several attempts to figure out. I think they got it under control now. But they kept blowing the place up. As far as radio masts go, those look pretty good. Really good. I like it. And here comes the town of Grindavik, which is currently vacant due to the eruptions. They started kicking everyone out back in November when the ground started shaking enough to indicate that something bad was coming. And something bad did come on December 18th when lava started spewing out of this area right up here. And I know that because I saw an aerial picture of that was probably taken from right about here, so I could see where it was in relation to the town. But the lava was shooting up 300 feet in the air and was so bright that you could see it all the way from Reykjavik at night, which is way out here, about 15 miles away. What we got going on down there? Some more ships. Looks phenomenal. So nice. Beautiful. Feels like Christmas. Wish I had my Christmas hat on. My Santa Claus hat. And when people aren't fleeing molten rock down there, it's mostly fishermen. This place out here is called the Blue Lagoon, and there's a big thermal spring right here, which is actually more white than blue, but this place is huge. This is the #1 tourist attraction in Iceland. They get about 1 million people a year coming through there. And it was opened up in 1992, and this is another geothermal plant right here. And when we look at it from the satellite map, you will see that it does look quite a bit more white than that. And that's because what people are really after down there is the mud. Because everybody loves a good mud facial. Right, Chet? Yeah. Mr. Vanilla and Lavender. He's already got our tickets for that place. So here's the seam where it was erupting from. And if you look at it now, it's all burnt out and black all around here where the lava was flowing. And it wasn't a huge flow, but it definitely looked neat. Alright, we're going to fly a little bit of a stepwise eastward trek here as we check out some more volcanoes and cool terrain. And I'm going to point out another spot here in just a second. This is it right here. They had another eruption earlier this year in the summertime, which was through the end of July and the beginning of August. And that's a little tiny volcano called Litli-Hrútur. And unlike the one back there, this one gave us a nice little blend of a volcanic cone spewing and some fissures in the tops of this thing. I'm going to include a video I found. It's like a minute and 50 seconds or so. You should definitely check it out. It's a 4K drone video flying over that while it was erupting. Absolutely awesome. So check out the link for that in the video description too. But that just looked really, really neat. Alright, I'm going to come up a little bit here because we're going to be flying over slightly higher terrain, so we'll go to 3,500 feet for just a little while, and then come back down after we get over these. Alright, that's all set. There is a little airstrip all the way up in the northwest portion of this country that is one of my favorites in the sim, and if you've flown around out here a lot, you've probably already seen it, but when we get to the satellite map at the end, I'll show you where that is so you can get the code for it. If you haven't flown in or out of there, you've got to check that out. Very much like flying around the fjords of Norway. And there's a huge mountain right next to the strip and a little fishing town next to it. So cool. Yeah, so the top of this thing is missing when you watch the video, and there's just lava burbling out of there, and then it's all just running down here into this little channel. And this is another volcano here, and that one looks about like that. I don't know when the last time that one erupted was. But look at this landscape. Not quite as cool and intense as some of those we saw up in the Andes, but it is definitely neat looking, isn't it? And if you wanted to, somewhere out about maybe 80 to 100 miles in this direction, there's another huge mountain with a huge glacier. And if you search for Christmas at flightsim.to, they've made a Santa runway out there. It's not one you can select in the sim, so I think putting it in the community folder adds the runway, but it looks really neat if you want to do something very festive for the holiday season. And there's a really nice glacier up there to check out too. Alright, so we're just going to kick back and soak in all this beautiful scenery as we head up to the capital, and while we do that, I'll share some Icelandic history with you. It's believed that settlement of the island started around 874 AD when a Norwegian chief named Ingolfur Arnarson came out here to enjoy the hot mud and some fishing, followed by some more settlers and their thralls from Norway over the next few hundred years. And their original form of government was independent of any nation, and it was parliamentary in nature, and they called it the Althing, which according to Wikipedia is one of the world's oldest functioning legislative assemblies. I think they shut it down a couple of decades ago, but they must have given it that honorary title. And as is usually the case, once any area reaches a critical mass of population, which must not have been real big around here, but civil wars eventually got started as the people along the coast, I guess, were battling for mud and fish. And Norway did not fail to notice that as they swept in and took control in the 1200s. So the Vikings came in and conquered the Vikings. But as the world caught revolution fever after the French and Americans showed everyone how it was done in the 1700s, Iceland eventually caught the bug as well, forming a semi-independent republic with the Danes in 1918. And there's always been some kind of kissing cousins relationship with all the Scandinavian countries and these guys. I think Norway and Denmark and maybe even Sweden were all kind of paired up for a little while. But once the Nazis rolled into Denmark in 1940, Iceland saw the writing on that wall and became a republic in 1944, formally cutting all governmental ties with outside countries. I don't know if this one here is a thermal lake or not. There's no feeder rivers or streams or anything that comes into it, but I read that everything is kind of fed from groundwater coming up, and if that's the case, it probably is a little bit warmer than ambient temperature, but I'm not sure if it's as warm as some of those other smaller ones. I didn't notice any steam coming out of it on the satellite map. But before Iceland could toss everybody out, the Brits, knowing that Germany would be eyeballing this place as a great location for a base in the North Atlantic, which they most certainly were, the Brits invaded and took control in a move called Operation Fork on May 10th of 1940. And they didn't really invade it. That's probably a bit of an overstatement. As soon as they rolled into town with 4 big warships, all the locals drove their trucks out there to help them offload everything. So I think the Icelanders knew what was going on over there in Europe and said, yeah, come on in, help us out. And a year later, with open arms, the American troops were invited to move in so the Brits could move out to defend their island. And as I mentioned before, everyone kind of chilled out after the war and headed back to their respective homelands until the Cold War brought the U.S. back in the 1950s. And I imagine having all those foreigners out here was probably pretty good for the local economy, particularly prostitution, as is often the case during war times when a bunch of soldiers are coming in. So apparently they were having a little bit of trouble with the younger gals keeping their eyes on the younger guys. I'm sure the guys didn't mind that much at all. I don't think they're doing that anymore, Chet. Sorry. But you never know. We'll see what's going on at the Blue Lagoon when we get out there. Chet already got our tickets for that place. The climate out here is considered subpolar oceanic with cool but not freezing summers, with average temps in the mid-50s, which sounds freezing to me here in Florida. And the winters are actually a lot warmer than I would have thought, thanks to the proximity to the Gulf Stream, a lot like Norway. Just kind of hovers right around the freezing point. I think the toughest thing for me if I lived out here would be the lack of sunshine, which I suppose they probably make up for in the summer because they have pretty long daylight hours once the year flips over. Look at that. So there's Reykjavik out there. That's what we're coming into. And it looks like, man, you can already see a couple massive ships out there. Look at those things. Beautiful. All right, once we turn over there, I'm going to start coming down again. Some famous people you might recognize from Iceland are Björk and pretty much any strongman competition winner, especially if their name is Magnus. Remember back in the 90s, I used to always watch those things. There was a guy from Iceland named Magnus Ver Magnusson, which is just perfect. And speaking of strongmen, Iceland was beer-free until 1989 when a referendum was voted down ending a 74-year sud ban. And I don't know if it was all liquor that was banned. It just said beer in there, which would seem weird to just not allow anyone to drink beer. But maybe it wasn't hard enough to keep everybody warm. They didn't want people getting wasted and still being cold. Alright, once we come over this ridge, I'll start coming down and then we'll set the sun and see if we can spot any of the northern lights. They're kind of hit or miss. It's not like they're covering the whole sky. On my last trip, I was able to spot some of them, and hopefully the clouds won't be too bad out here, but it will put them up there, which is cool because I don't think in real life they cover the entire sky either. Alright, let's go ahead and set our new altitude for 2,500, and then we'll set the sun. And we don't need to move the time too far forward because it's almost sunset as it is. Let's see. We'll do... That looks about right. Alright, can we see anything yet? There we go. There's a little right there. See that? Let me dip down some. Very cool. We'll see if we can spot some more a little bit later. Ooh, that's a little dark, isn't it? Let's get ourselves some lights in here. That's better. There we go. Let me get myself situated here. Alright, as we make our way into the capital of Reykjavik, I'll tell you a little bit about this place. It's not a huge city, for one thing, but 60% of the Iceland population lives out here, which is around 250,000 people in the whole metro area, so not massive. And this was also the first spot that was settled by Ingolfur Arnarnsson back in 874. And according to legend, this site was selected when the guy threw over 2 big poles into the water so that the gods could decide where he should come ashore. And unfortunately for him, the gods were in no particular hurry because they had to scour the coastline for 3 years before they found those things washed up right down here. And what would become Reykjavik? And that name is derived from an Old Norse phrase meaning smoke bay, which apparently was indicative of the steam rising up from all the thermal springs in the area. Looks like everything is pretty well lit, which looks beautiful, really. Real nice, so I don't think we'll have trouble spotting any of the stuff that I bookmarked once we get out here. We'd see more details if the sun was up, but it's Christmas, it's Northern Lights. Can we see any more yet? Yeah, there's some more over there. Awesome. Alright, right over here in this area is going to be the first thing that we're going to try to look for, and that is the Lagard Als Valor Stadium, and that's their big soccer outfit in town where the national football team plays. And that is European football, of course. And it's not really huge. They've only got bleachers on one side of it. And when it's configured for soccer, it only holds about 10,000 people, but I read a review from a guy that said he saw the best Guns N' Roses concert he'd ever seen down there. And I think when they throw seats down on the field, they can double it to 20,000, which still isn't big. And directly north of the stadium, which I don't think we'll be able to see at night, is a complex with some gardens and a zoo and some public swimming pools that are thermally heated, which is cool. Or warm, depending on your preferred context. And on this island right over here, we're going to see a big beam of light shining up in the air in just a minute. I'll tell you about that once we get over there, but let me see if we can spot this stadium. Look how good that looks. Absolutely phenomenal. We don't get to do a lot of night flying on here, obviously, since we're trying to find stuff on the ground, but this is nice. Looks gorgeous. So let's see, the airport that we're coming into is right down here. We're going to come in on this runway, so we're going to circle all the way around here, look at everything downtown, come up this way, for our downwind leg, and then we're going to come in on that runway right there. Ooh, look at these ships they got down here. Those look like they might be oil, but if they were oil, it'd be pretty small, but they look a little bit big for fishing ships. So there's the stadium right there, and the bleachers are over here on this side of it. I don't think there's anything on this side, and the pools and the zoo and all that are right over here, but we're either too far or it's too dark to really see those. Look at the size of that thing. Holy smokes. Huge. Oh, and look, a cruise ship. Probably Norwegian Cruise Lines. That definitely looks like an oil tanker there. All right, see that light coming up there? That thing is called the Imagine Peace Tower, and that was built in 2007, orchestrated by Yoko Ono as a tribute to her late husband, John Lennon. And the physical tower down at the bottom is pretty small. It surrounds a little wishing well, but the 15 searchlights surrounding that thing can project a beam of light up to 13,000 feet in the air on a clear night. And it's a good thing they have such a surplus of clean energy out here, because that baby needs 75,000 watts of juice to power those lights. Amazing. Look at that. Well, that stadium is like... you'd be blinded if you were sitting down there. Look how well lit that is. Oh, you can see one of the pools right there. See it? All right, right on this side of this little port we're going to come up on here is the Harpa Concert Hall and their convention center. That's this thing right here. And they also built that in 2007. Home to all things qualifying as both fancy and musical. You did get our opera tickets, right? No, he didn't. He forgot. He was so excited about the mud bath. And I read that all around the outside, it looks like it's mirror-coated, very reflective glass in real life. And I read they got all kinds of LED lights all around it. And I think I even saw that maybe they project different types of pictures up there, different times of year. Right here is the Reykjavik City Hall. And there's a little lake right along here. And this is the campus for the University of Iceland out here. That semicircle is part of it. Their National Library is right here. The Icelandic History Museum is that building right there. And I forgot to see how many people are at that university, but it must not be huge, because it's not a real populated area. There's some more soccer fields. All right, so let's come on down to, let's say, 2,000 feet as we get ready for our downwind leg. And we'll start slowing down some. And get our landing lights back on so it doesn't start telling me that I forgot. So there's 3 runways out here, only 2 ILS signals, and they're both coming from this direction that we're at now. And I think we're probably landing the wrong direction on this runway because I didn't even have an approach plate for it. So don't tell anybody. Chet said that he knows someone on the board down there, so he got us clearance to come in this way. And this thing right down here is a big glass-topped fancy restaurant right next to the airport. And out here, they have a church that kind of looks like the Sydney Opera House. It's got a bunch of arches on it, and I think that was built in the last couple of decades. It's not real old, but there's a big opening down there where you can see that, which is pretty cool. So a little bit more info about Reykjavik Airport as we circle around here. As I mentioned earlier, that one is strictly for their domestic flights and smaller planes, with the longest runway at 5,500 feet. The one we're coming in on is 4,500 feet. And that was not the first airport in the vicinity. They had a few grass strips out here before that place was built, which launched its first airplane, the first one ever to launch from Iceland, in September of 1919. And that was an Avro 504 for all you biplane lovers. That looks like a pretty big building there. I wonder what that is. I couldn't tell that that was standing out like that from the satellite image, so we'll see if we can try to make a guess about what that might be once we get out there. It looks like a warehouse, doesn't it? But I wonder if those are fields of some kind. They kind of look like it. But the current strips out here were built by the British Army, not the U.S., when they arrived back in 1940. And they ran that place until it was handed back over to Iceland right at the end of the war in 1946. But as you can see, the city's kind of grown up around it, and a lot of folks have started considering it a bit of a nuisance due to the noise pollution and otherwise very valuable real estate that it's sitting on right in the middle of town. You know, there's enough sky glow out here that you can still see the terrain pretty well, assuming you're watching this in a semi-dark place. Got an almost full moon. And some more northern lights. Look at that. That's really cool. Really cool. Another soccer field. So they've been talking about maybe tearing that airport down and moving it a little bit further out of town. Obviously, they've got no shortage of land, assuming they can avoid the volcanic spots. Which actually would probably be pretty hard to do because there's volcanoes everywhere out there. Or they thought about just tearing it down and using the place that we left from for all the travel. And they get about 400,000 passengers a year through this place, which isn't too shabby considering the city isn't all that big and it's only domestic flights going through there. Alright, I had some trouble landing this thing the last few times. Issues with deceleration, so I don't know if it's because the air is so thick and heavy because it's so cold out or what, but I'm going to have to concentrate a little bit harder than I usually do to get this baby down. Once we get lined up, I'll slow down some more. Boy, it just feels like Christmas, doesn't it? Look at that down there. You can just feel the cold in the air. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of this channel. Love all you guys. Love doing this. It's been a real blast. Alright, so autopilot off. Cut the throttles. And I'm going to be a little bit more quiet than I usually am because I need to concentrate. I don't want to bounce this thing all over the runway again. I can usually land the Kodiak without any issues, but something about being out here made it a little bit more challenging. Got to get down into our flap area or it's going to start beeping at me. Alright, 1 notch. I'm not even going to do 3 notches because, again, I was riding the throttle so hard before. Alright, 2 notches. We need to get down to about 85 before we touch down. 85 knots, that is. Not 85 feet. Although the runway is at 85 feet, actually. A little bit of a coincidence. What do we have, a little crosswind? Yeah, we got about a 6 knot crosswind. So we'll come over this way some. There is a payware add-on available for this airport. There was not any freeware that was just the entire airport. If you look at flightsim.to, there is some freeware you can download, but it just modifies the payware add-on. And there's a huge church out here somewhere. If you Google Iceland, that'll be one of the pictures that'll probably pull up with a huge white steeple on it. But I couldn't find the thing, which was shocking, considering how big of a landmark that must be, since it's in all the pictures. 500. We're getting blown over here. Alright, everybody be real quiet. Chet, don't say anything. Not a word. Alright, this looks better than my last one already. So once we get down, I'll just pull on over and we'll check out little NavMap, and I'll remember to show you that strip up on the northwest corner. Yeah, you can tell that's not a long runway. I love how they modeled the lights in this thing. They look so good. Alright, we made it. We got our crunching wheels going. Alright. Flaps up. And we'll just turn off right up here. Alright. Yeah, without the add-on, this airport looks kind of blocky and defaultish. But that's alright. We're only going to be here for a minute. Alright, let's turn those off before they blind anyone. Taxi lights on. We'll just park right over here. And I'm going to completely shut everything down because once I kill the engines, it's going to start making some beeping noises. Alright, parking brake on. That was fun, wasn't it? You better have brought my Christmas presents. I brought yours. Alright, so that's it. We'll turn all this stuff off. And here we go. Okay, take the centering off. So here is where that other strip is. Right up here. Oh, I got to turn the airports back on. Let's do that. It's this one right here. So that's Bravo, India, Lima, Sierra. And you can't even take off from this way, I don't think, unless you had something that could just shoot up straight in the air because there's a bunch of mountains right here, but there's a big ridge right along this side of it, which is cool. And I think they even have a cruise ship out here in the little bay. So you got to get up here and then immediately start turning over this way. They got this little fishing village here. What's that called? Iceland. Awesome. So a wonderful little short hop flight, a really short hop, is if you just want to cruise out here and land at this spot, or any of these really, but these do look a little bit like Norway. They're not quite as high as the mountains out there, but it's cool. It's a nice little trip. All right, coming back down here. Here's Keflavik, where we left from, and here is Patterson Airstrip, the one that is now abandoned. There's the little bunkers they got going over there. I don't see anyone practicing their ice driving out there, though. And here's the Camp Hopkins site. So this is where all the U.S. barracks were, and you can see they just have two little foundations now, but you can kind of see where the roads used to be out there. Came around the town here, looked at a couple of their fishing vessels, and there was one of the golf courses there. And here's where the Rockville Air Station was. And you can see that now it's just nothing but foundations, and I don't see anything that looks like a radar dome anywhere, so that must have been part of that add-on, I'm guessing. And here's Gardush, which you can see looks a lot like Gardur, and whatever that letter is that represents the D was the one that I had never seen before, so I don't know how you properly pronounce that. And then here's the lighthouses out here. This is the one that we saw, and then there's the newer one, I'm guessing, out on the tip of that point right there. And there's a lighthouse in. Another golf course there. There's our little fishing village. And out here is where those military planes were parked, and this is the spot that had been touched up with the new hangars with the fighters in them, if you want to go down there and take a peek at that. And then here's where the bridge between the continents is, and you can see it right there. It goes over one of those little ridges. And especially if the snow is turned off, you'll see the parking spot. So if you want to try to get closer and see the bridge, maybe you could see it in the sim, but that's where that is. Your marker will be this little lake. You can see it's pretty close to that. And then here's the geothermal plant out here. So this is where they're pumping all the 600-degree water up, sending it through these pipes down here. And if you want to just walk right into that and see how they do that, apparently you can. And here's that lighthouse here, where there were two of them, but there's really just one in real life. The spot where the oldest lighthouse in the country was, and then there's those rocks that we saw there. And then we came over here, here's another golf course. Here are those two big radio transmitters. And then here's the town that they had to clear out for the eruption, which looked beautiful in the sim. Boy, everybody's got their soccer fields, don't they? Looks beautiful. And here's the Blue Lagoon, where Chet and I are heading right as soon as we're done with this flight. And you can see it's more white than blue, really. And here's the other geothermal plant. Look how big that place is, though. It looks really nice. Really nice. But you have to be at least 2 years old to go into the mud. So, Chet, you're going to have to act like an adult for just a little while. And here's where the eruption was, coming right up out of this seam right here. And then here's where the other volcano was, where I included the video footage in the description, so check out that link. It's a really short video, but it looks awesome. Litli-Hrútur. That's where that thing blew up. Then we came out here and checked out all these wonderful little ridges and volcanoes, took in the sights. So the place where the Santa... Oh, it's a lot farther than 100 miles. The Santa runway, it's not this one. It's right down in here somewhere is where they wound up sticking it. So if you want to check that out from Flight Sim TO, you can load that up. That's where it'll be. And here's Reykjavik out here. I put a mark on this place, but when I flew over the first time, this is an open air museum. It didn't really look like anything that was particularly distinguished from the rest of the scenery, so we skipped that. And here's their stadium. And you can see they just have, well, it looks like they got some seating over here, but about 10,000 is all that can hold. Here's where the zoo and the pools are, and I don't know where the zoo would be, because I don't see where, unless the animals are all inside this thing, but those pools are thermally heated. Pretty interesting. And here's where the Imagine Peace Tower is, and look at how small that is. But the beam of light is not, nor is the electricity that they use. 75,000 watts. Man. And then here's the Harpa Concert Hall and Convention Center, which looked really cool. Bunch more ships they got parked down there, some of which we saw. And there's even a big yacht, it looks like, it's parked right down here. So if you want to look for that after you fly over this, they got a big yacht parked down there. It was kind of neat. Here's the City Hall. And then here's the university over here. That's their library, the National Museum. And here is where that fancy restaurant is. You can see the glass top on that. And I don't know where. I could not spot where that church is. This might be it here. The one with the huge steeple. But it's somewhere out here. If you look at any pictures of Reykjavik, you'll see it. And then we come on here for our approach, which was awesome. So that's it, guys. Very Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year. We'll have another video up, at least one, before the New Year rolls around. I have mapped out our flight for Papua New Guinea. I have cut around all of that awful auto-generated vegetation fill where the satellite image didn't cover it. So I think I've got a pretty good flight lined up for us. And that will be in the Porter, which means Chet's wife will come along with us, which will be a real treat. And we'll do that one up too. Had an absolute blast as always, guys. Hope you get everything on your Christmas list. See y'all again in the skies. Later.